Welcome, guys, to another episode of Twisted News. Right here is where we look at the craziest and strangest stories that are currently happening in the world. If you're into that and like our channel, then subscribe and hit those notifications because we're putting out lots of great content each and every week for you. For today's episode, we're going to look into a crazy story that I was unaware of about a chilling and mysterious number of missing persons cases that are happening in Mexico. Nearly 100,000 of them over the past 50 years. In the second story, we're covering a mom and daughter that were in an abusive household and were ultimately saved by a very simple item, a sticky note. Get rid of Scary Mysteries, Twisted News. Number 1. Mexico's missing people. We often find ourselves missing people and things that are not with us. It's a normal human feeling because of our emotions and the connections we make with those we have relationships with. However, the problem of a number of families in Mexico isn't as simple as missing someone they haven't contacted in a long time, because the people they miss have disappeared without a trace. The worst thing is that up until now, their missing loved ones are just currently being added into the overwhelming numbers that make up the statistics of people missing in Mexico, which, as of March of this year, totals 98,234 people. The number is disturbing, not only because it's overwhelmingly high, but also because these missing people had names, families, friends, and lives. To put that into perspective, there are cities that have a population of that size. Imagine that city losing almost all of its residents, and the remaining people are left without a clue as to what actually happened to them, not knowing if they're even still alive or not. And the reason for their disappearances, well, they're not exactly known. Until the authorities are able to find more clues about each individual's case, the reasons for their disappearance can either be linked to human trafficking or to organized crime like the cartel. These two are the most prominent crimes that the authorities are able to link to these cases. The first recorded missing person case goes all the way back to 1964, according to the country's National Search Commission. In a statement released in 2021 by Assistant Secretary for Human Rights, Alejandro Rodriguez, about 25% of the reported missing were women, with more than half of that percentage consisting of minors, their ages ranging anywhere between 10 and 19 years old. It was because of those numbers that the authorities linked some of the disappearances to human trafficking. There was also a surge in violence and disappearances when the government declared war against the cartels in Mexico in 2006. Out of the 32 states in Mexico, the capital city, along with Nuevo León, Jalisco, and 7 more states, hold more than 70% of the missing cases. There was even a ruined house in Nuevo León that the authorities have dubbed an extermination site because of the number of charred remains found on that property. Investigators spent months gathering chopped up skeletal remains and burnt items of clothing, but they were still uncertain just how many exactly died there. Out of desperation and frustration against the seeming lack of action by the government, the families of the missing have started to investigate on their own, creating search parties to look for any clues, or worse, remains of their loved ones. Enduring the heat and exhaustion is a more bearable struggle for them, but never knowing what became of their sons, daughters, siblings, and friends. Even with searches like this, though, whether headed by authorities, including the UN, they don't always succeed in finding bodies. Even if they do, what usually follows is even more challenging. Forensic experts aren't only struggling with the volume of remains they are expected to identify, they're also having difficulty with the remains themselves, as some bones are either too far or too damaged to work on. One can only imagine the harrowing last moments each victim must have been through at the hands of their killers. These are also evident in those whose remains, along with their items of clothing, were retrieved. clothes were soiled with dirt that was used to bury them, along with dried blood that belonged to the victims. Some of them were riddled with multiple bullet holes. Other items didn't have the holes, but had the same dried blood that they soaked in, which makes you think about the horrific methods of how their lives were taken from them. Experts believe that finding the disappeared and identifying the corpses aren't the main solution to the immense problem in Mexico. According to the UN Committee of Enforced Disappearances, the government must also work on investigating these cases, which means dealing directly with organized crime groups that continue to haunt the rest of the community. The current government has declared dedication to doing so, but it is a monumental task that the leaders must consistently keep fighting for the sake of the innocent. It's fairly normal to see people we know come and go, but what's not normal, and will never be easy to just accept, is when someone we love and hold dear is just taken away from us, leaving us hanging and always wondering. The families of the missing will always be in that situation until they can finally bring home their long-lost family members and bring the perpetrators to justice. Number 2. Sticky note saves mom and daughter. Sticky notes are very useful in almost any situation, at home, in school, at work, as a tool to remind us of the important tasks or errands we need to do, posted on the walls, in our notes, and on the door of the fridge. But one mother in Nevada actually used sticky notes for something else entirely, to try to save the life of her daughter and her own. When Eli Dominguez unexpectedly passed away in January of 2021 to an unidentified respiratory illness, he left behind his 28-year-old phlebotomist wife, whose identity remains undisclosed to the public, and their 2 children. A friend of Eli then came into the picture, and his name was Brandon Tolson, who was 35 years old. His presence was welcomed by the family, but little did they know the nightmares they were about to face with this man. The widowed wife from Nevada was left to take care of her 2 children, a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son named Mason. Being a single parent was hard enough, but the situation at the start of the global pandemic made it even harder. Brandon and the mother soon became close and eventually started dating in March of 2021. Shortly thereafter, the mother and her 2 children moved into Brandon's house. It seemed promising at first, but as time went by, Brandon's grip on the family started to tighten. Allegedly, he soon became controlling of the mother. He alienated her from her family and friends, and he even quit her job for her, allegedly through a text. He then also confiscated her cell phone and her car keys, and he even went as far as to control her social media. Then, he forbid her to leave the house or go to the garage. When they did, she had to be handcuffed to the car. Motion sensors and surveillance cameras were then installed all over the house to monitor everybody's movements. Padlocks were installed in the bedrooms, and he even watched her every time she went to the bathroom. He also apparently threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave or escape, but what's worse was when Brandon separated the mother from her children. It was never clear what the routine was when they were at home, but it was most likely the mother and her children were able to spend time together during the day. However, after the 11th of December of 2021, she never saw her son Mason again, and Brandon never bothered to explain where the boy was. Understandably, the mother feared the worst. She then started to think of ways to escape Brandon. She planned for weeks, but wasn't exactly sure what to do, and her solution came in the form of a pad of sticky notes and a pen in her alleged captor's car. Every school day, the 2 adults would bring the daughter to school. The mother would be left alone in the car as Brandon accompanied the child until they reached the crossing guard. On February 21st, a Monday, just as the 2 left her alone in the car, the mother immediately grabbed the pad and pen and and wrote down notes regarding their situation, seeking help from authorities. She was able to hide the notes from Brandon when they got home, but the next problem to solve was how to get those notes to the authorities. But she didn't need to wait that long. Surprisingly, Brandon allowed the mother and daughter to sleep together in the same bed. She then used that opportunity to tell her daughter her plans and what the child needed to do with the notes. The next day, while getting dressed for school, the mother placed the notes inside the sock of her daughter, reminding her of their plan from the night before. Then they left for school, and it seemed like it went well. Brandon didn't notice anything different from their routine. What he didn't know, though, was that the daughter was successful at handing over the notes to her teacher, who then called the police to report the distressing notes. Cops immediately went to Brandon's house and arrested him, and finally the mother and her daughter were free. However, the news that followed their freedom was harrowing. After she told them about her son, whom they hadn't seen for months, the police were able to locate his dead body inside a freezer in the garage. They also found out about the large hole Brandon had started to dig in the backyard, which they believed he was going to use to bury Mason's body. Brandon is now charged with 2 counts for kidnapping and murder, and it was later found out that in 2018 he was arrested for domestic battery, which somehow cements that the accusations brought to him by the Nevada mother could actually be true, especially with what happened to Mason. After almost a year of mental, physical, and sexual abuse, the mother and daughter were finally free from their reign of their captor. But they'll never be able to be with Mason again. Much like how sticky notes are used to remind us of what needs to be done, may this case be a good reminder as well for you to not trust anybody so easily. Maybe jotting that down on a sticky note would help you to always keep that in mind. Thank you guys for tuning in for a whole library of even crazier videos and much more. Show us some support over on our patreon.com/scarymysteries page. Thank you all so much for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.